The lecture hall buzzed with energy. Every seat was filled. Elite students, visiting scholars, camera crews, and live stream moderators, all eyes on the man about to walk in. Professor Nathaniel Whitmore, Harvard's legend. The man who once decoded a Cold War algorithm in real time on live television. Today, he was back to do what he loved most: prove the impossible stays impossible. A sharp voice echoed through the mic as the door opened. He stepped in, calm, crisp suit, silver-rimmed glasses. The room erupted into applause. But, at the very back, unnoticed, sat a janitor's son. 9 years old, legs swinging from a chair too big for him. His mother, in a faded Harvard cleaning uniform, sat beside him silently, her hands folded tightly in her lap. No one looked their way. Why would they? Professor Whitmore adjusted his mic and smiled. Some problems were never meant to be solved, he said, walking to the board. Today, I'll show you why. He picked up the chalk and began scribbling an equation that looked more like alien language than math. Symbols, curves, impossible loops. He turned back to the audience. This puzzle broke minds for over a century. Not even artificial intelligence could make it halfway through. So let's not expect magic. He chuckled. So did the crowd. Nervous laughter, admiration, worship. The mother shifted in her seat. Her name tag read Danielle. Her son's eyes, however, never left the board. Isaiah, small for his age, hoodie sleeves covering half his hands. No phone, no notebook, just watching, calculating, quiet. Whitmore walked the class through every step of the so-called unsolvable. At minute 9, he paused dramatically. As you see, he said, circling a section with flair, this is the contradiction. The wall, the dead end, mathematically confirmed, logically airtight. Light applause again. And then, a small voice from the back. Excuse me, I think I know. Silence. Dead. Thick silence. Heads turned, first to see who interrupted, then to process what they were seeing. A child. A black child. Raising his hand. Someone in the second row scoffed. Is he serious? Whitmore's eyes narrowed. I'm sorry. What did you say? Isaiah stood up. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. I see a pattern. Right there. You stopped too soon. The professor blinked, half-smile returning. Young man, this problem isn't in your grade level. It's not even in your generation's level. Isaiah didn't flinch. You missed the symmetry loop. The primes repeat, not end. The smirk on Whitmore's face froze. The camera crew, sensing something, zoomed in. One lens framed the professor's face. Another moved toward the boy. Danielle gripped her son's hand under the table, but didn't stop him. She just whispered, "Baby." But Isaiah had already stepped into the aisle. His hands trembled. His eyes didn't. Whitmore looked toward the board, then toward the crowd, then back at the boy. Come forward, he said. Let's hear the rest of this magic. The crowd murmured. Some leaned in. Others prepared to laugh. But no one expected what would happen next. Isaiah walked forward, holding nothing but the numbers in his head. And in that moment, Harvard forgot everything it thought it knew. Every camera, every eye, every breath was locked on a janitor's son. And the world held its breath. The air was different in the back halls of Harvard. Not heavy, not loud, just indifferent. The kind of silence that follows you when people don't see you at all. Danielle had worked those marble floors for 6 years. Same uniform, same shift, same routine. Clean before dawn, disappear before lecture. Professors passed her without eye contact. Students stepped around her mop like it wasn't attached to a person. She wasn't bitter, just tired. But she had one reason to show up every morning. Isaiah. A quiet boy with questions bigger than the building itself. He never liked cartoons, only patterns. By 5, he was drawing Fibonacci spirals on foggy windows. By 7, he was borrowing Danielle's phone to read number theory PDFs. She didn't understand any of it, but she understood him. Every night, he'd sit on the supply room floor while she worked, flipping through crumpled textbooks someone had thrown out. No one noticed him. Sometimes, Danielle wondered if that was a blessing or a curse. One night, he asked her, "Why don't they teach this in my school?" She didn't have an answer, just brushed his hair back and whispered, "Some things you teach yourself." The invitation to the lecture wasn't really an invitation. It was a fluke. Danielle overheard a professor talking about it while dumping a coffee cup into the trash. Harvard's star mathematician was doing a live event. The whole campus was buzzing. That morning, the sitter canceled last minute. Danielle debated calling off work, but Isaiah begged to come. "I'll stay out the way," he promised, eyes wide. So she brought him, wiped down the last row chairs herself, and sat quietly while the auditorium filled with white coats and sharper egos. Isaiah was nearly swallowed by the seat, legs dangling, head just poking above the crowd. No one looked back, but Danielle watched him. She saw the way he leaned forward when the professor started writing, the way his eyes tracked every movement like a language he already knew. She wanted to reach over and stop him, to keep him from standing out, to protect him from the moment she knew might come, because she had seen it before. When a black boy raises his hand in a room not built for him, there's no applause waiting, only scrutiny. Danielle had once been a scholarship student herself, in a school that taught her quickly she didn't belong. She dropped out after a professor laughed at her accent mid-presentation. That laugh still echoed somewhere in her bones. She never let Isaiah hear it. And yet, here he was, 9 years old, no degree, no notes, just raw clarity. His voice not raised in defiance, but in honesty. "I think I know," he had said. Danielle's heart was still racing. She had taught him to stay small, stay quiet. Don't challenge what doesn't want to hear you. But maybe she was wrong. Maybe he wasn't meant to hide. And maybe, just maybe, this was the moment the world would be forced to look. A hush fell over the room as Isaiah stepped forward. His sneakers made soft squeaks against the polished floor. The audience, PhD students, professors, visiting scholars, sat frozen, unsure if this was a prank, a mistake, or just a waste of time. Professor Whitmore folded his arms. "All right," he said, his voice dipping into condescension. "Let's hear the young mathematician's theory." A few chuckles spread across the room. A woman near the front smirked. Someone whispered, "Is this a make-a-wish thing?" Isaiah didn't blink. He walked slowly toward the board, eyes fixed on the equation. Whitmore's chalk still clung to the symbols like dust on glass. The audience expected a pause, a fumble, a childish explanation. Something they could dismiss with ease. But Isaiah spoke with clarity. "You stopped too early. Right here." He pointed to a loop. "You assumed a fixed endpoint, but the primes continue. You cut it mid-pattern." The smirk on Whitmore's face cracked slightly. "Interesting," he replied, tone stiff. "But we've already tested for that. Exhaustively." Isaiah looked up. "I know, but you didn't shift the axis by 9." The room shifted. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Not as a guess, but as a fact. Someone in the second row leaned back, whispering under breath, "This gotta be staged." Another student muttered, "Affirmative action running wild." Danielle heard it, every syllable like a needle, but she didn't move. Her hand rested on her purse. Tight grip, steady eyes. Isaiah continued. He stepped onto a small platform meant for shorter lecturers and picked up a second piece of chalk. With hands barely reaching the lower board, he began replicating the pattern. Fast, clean, precise. This loop repeats every 293 digits. You marked it as noise, but it's not. It mirrors. A math professor from MIT sat forward, frowning. Whitmore didn't respond immediately. His jaw locked. He glanced at the board, then back at Isaiah. And for the first time, he didn't laugh. But someone else did. From the back, a white male student scoffed. "Can we get back to real math?" Another joined in, louder. "This ain't TikTok. Sit down, kid." A wave of nervous laughter rippled through the room. Isaiah paused. His shoulders tightened. But he didn't step back. He drew one more symbol, a mirrored cluster of primes that curved perfectly back into Whitmore's logic. The crowd started to shift, not out of respect, but out of discomfort. Because the logic made sense. They just didn't want it to. Danielle stood slowly, just a few inches, not to interrupt, just to let her son know she was still there. Whitmore stepped forward. "What's your name?" "Isaiah," he answered. "And where exactly did you study number theory, Isaiah?" Danielle's voice carried from the back. Calm. Proud. "The supply room." A few heads turned. Laughter stopped. Isaiah looked at the professor, unshaken. "I don't want to embarrass you. I just want to show you what you missed." Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "I see. And you believe this from a juice box and a spiral notebook?" Isaiah didn't respond. He turned and circled one final cluster. The board was now split. Whitmore's work above, Isaiah's work below. The connection was undeniable. And that's when it happened. The MIT professor stood, quietly, slowly. She walked toward the board, examined both halves, then raised a hand. "He's right," she said. "This isn't a contradiction. It's a loop, a mirror function buried in noise." Gasps. Real ones this time. Whitmore's lips parted, but no words came out. The camera zoomed in on his face. And Isaiah? He just stepped back. No victory dance, no pride. Just a quiet boy who saw a pattern everyone else refused to look for. And in that refusal, they exposed themselves. Isaiah stepped back from the board, chalk dust on his fingers, the mirrored primes glowing beneath fluorescent lights like forgotten truth finally seen. The silence in the room wasn't confusion anymore, it was discomfort. Authority had shifted, not because he yelled or argued or demanded, just because he was right. Undeniably right. Professor Whitmore looked at the board like it had betrayed him. He adjusted his glasses. Again, still silent. The MIT professor was now at Isaiah's side, nodding slowly. "Where did you learn this pattern recognition?" she asked softly. Isaiah shrugged. "It's based on a method from ancient African lattice sequences. I read about it in a discarded research paper. Someone left it on a cart in the archives." Whitmore blinked. "What paper?" "A 1961 theory by Dr. Mbeki Kamanzi," Isaiah said. It was ignored because it didn't fit Western logic models, but it loops perfectly. Danielle covered her mouth. She knew that name. Her grandfather once mentioned Kamanzi, how his work vanished after he tried to present it in Europe. The audience began murmuring. Students pulled out their phones. Someone whispered, "Search doctor." Kamanzi. Another said, "I thought that theory was debunked." But there it was. Live, visual, undeniable, redrawn on the lower board by a 9-year-old with chalk-stained hands. Whitmore finally found his voice. "That's a very bold interpretation, young man." "It's not interpretation," Isaiah said without hesitation. "It's math." More murmurs. The room was turning, from curiosity to embarrassment, not for the boy, for the professor. A student raised his hand. "Why did no one ever teach us this method?" The MIT professor looked toward Whitmore. He didn't answer. Another hand went up. "Why didn't the computer models catch the loop?" Isaiah answered instead. "Because they weren't programmed to look for anything African, only Euclidean symmetry." The words dropped like bricks. A journalist in the room started typing faster. The live stream chat exploded. "This kid's destroying Harvard's math god." Wait, did he just cite a buried African math system? They buried a theory to keep white authors at the top. Wild. Danielle stayed seated, but she could feel her entire body shaking. Not with fear, but something hotter, something rising. Her son just pulled an erased black genius back into the light, in front of cameras, faculty, and live-streaming scholars. Whitmore stared at the board, like it was caving in. Then he stepped back and sat down. He didn't dismiss Isaiah, didn't clap, didn't argue. He just sat. And everyone saw it. The audience knew what had happened. It wasn't about whether a boy solved a problem. It was that a black child, born to a woman who mopped their floors, had walked in and made their god of math irrelevant, with a method they'd erased from history. Isaiah picked up his juice box and walked back to his seat. No one stopped him. No one could. The room didn't move. Not even after the boy sat down. Not even after he quietly resumed sipping from his juice box. The equation still glowed across the board, half in Whitmore's chalk, half in Isaiah's. Connected, completed, unarguable. At the edge of the room, a man in a brown suit stood silently. Dean Holloway. He had slipped in during the second wave of murmurs, called in by a faculty group chat that simply said, "Emergency. Room 3A, live stream." He stared at the board, then at the professor who hadn't spoken since sitting down. A camera light shifted, panning slowly to the dean. Everyone recognized him. Harvard's coldest calculator. A man who didn't blink at scandal, unless it went viral. Now it had. Phones buzzed across the lecture hall, students refreshing Twitter. The top trend wasn't the lecture. It wasn't Harvard. It was the boy. 9-year-old black genius solves unsolvable Harvard problem live. Buried African math theory proven true by janitor's son. Danielle kept her eyes low, but she heard it all. The change in breath patterns. The way people now moved around them. Slower, more cautious. One student looked up from his phone. "Yo, Kamanzi's paper is back online." "Kamanzi?" another repeated. "Wasn't that pulled?" "Yeah, archived, not peer-reviewed. Some African dude in the 60s. It's what the kid used." Dean Holloway turned toward Professor Whitmore. "Did you know?" he asked, low. Whitmore didn't answer. The MIT professor, still standing in awe, spoke instead. The boy's solution mirrors Kamanzi's rejected sequence, almost identically. The dean's face went rigid. This entire thing was recorded? Live streamed, someone said. Over 80,000 views already. People are stitching it into TikToks. He turned to the camera crew. Cut the feed. No use, a producer replied. Clips already posted. Global now. Danielle shifted her hand onto Isaiah's knee. He looked up at her, eyes calm, unbothered. But she could feel the tremble in his leg. They weren't used to the spotlight, only the shadows. A visiting professor leaned forward, voice shaking. We dismissed an entire African theory for 60 years. This child just revived it in 10 minutes. Another added, this is academic malpractice. If the paper held up, why wasn't it re-reviewed? The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was exposed. A student from the back asked the question everyone was thinking. Was it rejected because it was wrong, or because of who wrote it? Whitmore looked up. His eyes found Isaiah. And for a moment, just a moment, you could see it. The exact second his legacy cracked. He didn't follow modern formatting, Whitmore mumbled. Neither did Einstein, the student fired back. The crowd went quiet again. Only Isaiah's straw made a soft slurping sound. Danielle stood slowly, calmly, not out of fear, out of pride. A woman in a Yale jacket approached, flashing credentials. Ma'am, we'd like to invite your son to a closed panel. We're not interested, Danielle said without looking. A second woman chimed in, softer. He's very special. Danielle turned, eyes locked. He was special yesterday, too. Y'all just didn't see him. The reporters were already huddling by the door. Flashes popped. A student began recording a live reaction video right there in the aisle. Okay, y'all, so Harvard just got rocked by a fourth grader. Dean Holloway turned toward PR staff near the entrance. Get a statement drafted. Frame it around diversity. Fast. Behind him, someone whispered, How are we going to spin this? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. This wasn't just about math. It was about erasure, about a system built on choosing which minds mattered and which ones didn't. Until now. Isaiah looked at the board one last time, then turned away. The work was done. Let them deal with it. By the time the news cycle caught up, the story had already mutated into something unstoppable. Clips of Isaiah's chalk movements had been slowed down, highlighted, analyzed, and turned into reaction videos by every major outlet. MSNBC called him the child genius Harvard tried to ignore. NPR ran a segment on erased black intellect in academia. Even Fox News tried a spin, was the Harvard problem real or staged woke math? But the truth was undeniable. A child had walked into the most respected academic institution in America and uncovered not just an equation, but a buried history. Danielle's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Private schools offering full rides. Think tanks requesting interviews. Publishers emailing about book deals. A congresswoman even posted, Young minds like Isaiah's deserve space to thrive, without racism holding them back. Danielle ignored most of it. So did Isaiah. They didn't want photo ops. They wanted people to remember the silence before the applause. Harvard's official response came within 24 hours. A press release full of polished words. We are inspired by young Isaiah's insight, and grateful for the diverse brilliance that continues to walk our halls. Danielle read the statement aloud once, then tossed it into the trash. They weren't grateful when he raised his hand. They were embarrassed. Professor Whitmore's video apology came next, filmed in a dim study, voice shaking. In hindsight, I should have listened more carefully. Sometimes genius hides in the unexpected. I was wrong to doubt him. But there was no mention of Kamanzi, no mention of the buried theory, no mention of race. Just vague words meant to patch a legacy now cracked down the middle. Isaiah watched it on his tablet, then set it down. "He's sorry I was right," he said. Not sorry he ignored me. That was the difference. Not everyone missed the real point, though. A global movement began trending within 3 days. Number reclaim, black math. People shared old texts, lost diagrams, rejected papers from African, Caribbean, and African American scholars who were erased by the academic gatekeepers. Suddenly, Kamanzi wasn't just a name from an archive. He was a symbol. A few mathematicians dug up his original work and reran the models. They found even more buried patterns, lost because the academic world labeled them non-conforming. Now, they were calling it revolutionary. Isaiah stayed home that week. Danielle made sure of it. They weren't going to let the same institutions that once ignored him now use him as a prop. Reporters camped outside the apartment for days. Danielle would peek through the blinds and say nothing. Until one morning, a letter arrived. By hand. It was from the White House. A quiet invitation. No cameras. Just a chance to meet someone who said they'd been watching. Isaiah looked at it, then folded it in half. "Can we just go to the park instead?" Danielle smiled. "Absolutely." Later that afternoon, while Isaiah chased pigeons and asked if clouds could divide by 0, a group of college students sat across the field watching him. One of them whispered, "That's him, right?" Another nodded. "Yeah, that's the kid." But Isaiah wasn't watching them. He was drawing spirals in the dirt with a stick. Danielle sat on the bench nearby, finally breathing. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about Harvard. It wasn't even about math anymore. It was about being seen, fully, completely. No explanation required. A week passed. Then another. The world didn't forget. But it moved like it always does, fast, hungry, distracted by the next trending headline. But in a quiet Boston neighborhood, where snow kissed cracked sidewalks and pigeons hopped across power lines, Isaiah lived like nothing had changed. He still brushed his teeth while humming prime numbers, still read books upside down on the couch, still asked Danielle if birds had patterns in their wings. But something had shifted. People noticed him now. At the corner store, the clerk no longer watched Danielle like she might steal something. He nodded when she walked in, offered a free bag of chips for Isaiah. At school, Isaiah's classmates sat closer. Not out of friendship, out of fascination. Like if they got close enough, maybe some of the genius would rub off. But Isaiah didn't brag. He never did. He just kept reading. Harvard sent another letter, a personal one this time. No cameras, no press. Just a short note. Isaiah is welcome to audit any class he wants. No age restrictions, no tuition, no conditions. Danielle read it twice, then folded it, and tucked it in a drawer. They'd already seen enough of Harvard. They weren't chasing invitations anymore. One rainy afternoon, a local community college asked Isaiah to speak. Just a short Q&A with some students in a math enrichment program. He agreed. They offered him a podium, a microphone, a camera setup. He declined them all. He sat on the edge of a desk, swinging his legs, smiling nervously. One student asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Isaiah thought for a second, then said, "I want to fix things people think are broken." Someone else asked, "Are you going to be a professor?" He shook his head. "Professors already exist. I want to be something new." They laughed, not at him, with him. Danielle watched from the back of the room. No uniform today. Just her real clothes, a warm sweater and jeans. She looked like a parent, not an employee. And people treated her like one. No one asked her to clean up. No one told her she was in the wrong place. She was right where she belonged. After the Q&A, a quiet girl approached Isaiah. She whispered, "I liked your math. I didn't know someone like me could do that." Isaiah smiled. "You can do anything. They just have to catch up." That night, back home, Danielle sat by the window. She opened the drawer and looked at all the letters they'd received. Ivy League schools, tech companies, news networks, award shows. She picked up one envelope, held it for a second, then slid it into the trash. They didn't need the world's applause. They needed space to grow. At exactly 9:17 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Danielle opened it slowly. A tall man stood there in a dark coat, holding a thick envelope. "Are you Danielle?" he asked. "Yes." "I was asked to deliver this. Personally." She opened it. Inside was a framed document, a newly published edition of Dr. Mbeki Kamanzi's 1961 paper. Reinstated, cited, acknowledged, officially. At the bottom, in bold, rediscovered and revived through the work of Isaiah Daniels. Danielle's hand trembled. She whispered, "Took them long enough." The man smiled. "They said it wouldn't have happened without you." Danielle shook her head. "It happened because truth never dies. It just waits." The man nodded, tipped his hat, and walked off. Inside, Isaiah sat on the floor, building a model out of magnets and wires. Danielle watched him for a long moment, then said, "You're going to change a lot more than equations, baby." He looked up. "Only if people are ready." She smiled. "They'll have to be." She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and stood at the window. The city outside looked the same, but it wasn't. Because now, when she walked into rooms, they saw her. They saw him. And most importantly, they remembered.